Welcome to Roundtable Radio. Through our conversations, we discover the holy and the ordinary, look for moments of grace and peace, and redefine what we're talking about when we talk about faith. Hey, Lillian.
Hello.
How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm so good. Welcome back to the podcast.
Yes.
So glad to have you back. Our reading this week is from Luke chapter 4. Do I have this right? I think you're on the wrong week in your book. There you are.
Mine's real one's over here.
Oh, yeah. You have Ed's right now. Okay. We're getting our stuff together, people. I appreciate your patience with us. It is Luke.
We were right the first time.
I was right the first time. Phew. Chapter 4, verses 14 through 30. Here we go. Then Jesus, in the power of the Spirit, returned to Galilee, and a report about him spread through all the surrounding region. He began to teach in their synagogues and was praised by everyone. When he came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up, he went to the synagogue on the Sabbath day, as was his custom. He stood up to read, and the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was given to him. He unrolled the scroll and found the place where it was written, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to bring the good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to set free those who are oppressed, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." And he rolled up the scroll, gave it back to the attendant, and sat down. The eyes of all in the synagogue were fixed on him. Then he began to say to them, "Today this scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing." All spoke well of him and were amazed at the gracious words that came from his mouth. They said, "Is this not Joseph's son?" He said to them, "Doubtless you will quote to me this proverb, 'Doctor, cure yourself.' And you will say, 'Do here also in your hometown the things that we have heard you did at Capernaum.' And he said, 'Truly I tell you, no prophet is accepted in his hometown.' But the truth is that there were many widows in Israel in the time of Elijah, when the heaven was shut up 3 years and 6 months, and there was a severe famine over all the land. Yet Elijah was sent to none of them, except to a widow at Zarephath in Sidon." We'll figure it out. Yeah. There were also many with a skin disease in Israel in the time of the prophet Elisha, and none of them were cleansed except Naaman the Syrian. When they heard this, all in the synagogue were filled with rage. They got up, drove him out of town, and led him to the brow of the hill on which their town was built, so that they might hurl him off the cliff. But he passed through the midst of them and went on his way. Here endeth the reading. You can't go home, apparently.
Yeah. So this is a funny one because each or 3 of the 4 gospels have an account of when he goes home.
Okay.
And this one is different from the other 2.
In what way?
So this is okay. This is my like little chicken scratch notes over here.
I love it.
In both Mark and Matthew, you have the story where he goes home and everyone's like, "That's Jesus. We know him."
Yeah.
And they kind of doubt they don't have faith.
Sure.
And so he's not able to do as much, or so he leaves because they doubt him. And he's like, prophets can't be prophets in their hometown.
Yeah.
This is a very different narrative because they do believe.
Okay.
Or at least you hear this. They're all saying good things about him, and they're all
they like start to.
They say things like, "Oh, like, is this not Joseph's son?" But it doesn't seem like is that just this guy? Because they're all speaking well of him. Mm-hmm. They're all very attentive to him. And it isn't until after he's like, "Yeah, but I'm not going to do that here," mm-hmm. that they start to like really get mad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's so interesting because I feel like there's that, you can almost picture like that element of like him being a kid and them seeing him as a teenager, and that idea that like they don't take him seriously mm-hmm. for the longest time. And like, is it not, I almost wonder if they then like make the connection of like, but isn't that this guy? You know?
Yeah, and so I'm going to flip, you're going to hear the like Lillian trying to find, I should have put a letter on this or something. But in the other kind of accounts of this, that is very much kind of the case of oh my gosh, this is such a pain in the butt.
Finding all your books with the microphone.
Of like Jesus went throughout. No, where did I? Okay,
You'll find it.
I'm taking
While you're doing
anger,
that, I
yeah.
think it's, I think also it's interesting because, it's very like evocative, the beginning of the story, because he's like standing up, he's unrolling the scroll, and it's like, you can picture it. Like, I feel like this is only one of the first time, this is one of the few times that he actually is speaking, like, air quote, in church, like in the synagogue, right? That we have accounts of.
There's a lot of stories, or there's a lot of times where it's like, he is teaching, or like he goes to synagogues and he teaches. I don't know how often we hear what he's saying other than the Proverbs. But while he's actually teaching, and there are these quotes from Isaiah, and you see that kind of through line throughout many gospels that like weave the
that narrative,
or bring back kind of the prophet wisdom.
Yeah.
So, oh my gosh.
You'll find it. I believe in you. And so, so the question in our book, as you're doing that, is why were the people in the synagogue angry when Jesus told these stories from the Old Testament of like, because like you said, there's that idea of him being like, well, I'm not going to do that here. And then also that they reacted so viscerally to the fact that like, it almost feels like he was anticipating the expectation that because this is his hometown, he's going to come in, he's going to perform 10,000 miracles, and it's going to be like heaven on earth because this is his hometown. And he's going, no, that's not what I'm supposed to be doing here.
Because he says the things that he says is he's like, I'm sure that you want me to do those miracles.
Right.
That I did in Capernaum, which he actually hasn't visited there yet in the story. It's a little weird switcheroo, but he's like, I'm sure you want me to do these miracles, but it's kind of like when I was a young child, I had like aunts who would go sing the "You Don't Always Get What You Want" song, and it's kind of, that's like what kind of came up in my mind. He's like, not everyone gets a miracle, and
it's almost like he's to me, it feels like he's saying, I'm not going to interfere in your lives. That's not what's meant for you, is kind of how I'm interpreting that. Like, God has a plan for you. I'm not going to take away all of the struggle. I'm not going to take away all of the burden because that's not what you, like you say, is what you want, but that might not be what you need.
And I think there's all sorts of kind of reasons that you can kind of extrapolate of why he might not want to or might not feel able to kind of perform miracles for his hometown. So you have the idea of like, maybe these people don't really understand my role.
Right.
And so they can hear these things, but they can't really have faith in who I am. Like maybe you have that element. Maybe you have the element of like not really wanting to play favorites.
Sure.
Because you're trying to do these miracles everywhere. If you're home, like they might try to be like, well, you belong to us.
Right.
You should stay here and do all of these miracles.
Yeah.
And so there's this, okay, I finally found one of the other accounts.
Nice.
So we're taking a little break to hear from the Matthew version. Jesus came to his hometown and began to teach the people in their synagogue, so that they were astounded and said, "Where did this man get this wisdom and these seeds of power? Is not this the carpenter's son? Is not this his mother called Mary? And are not his brothers James and Joseph and Simon and Judas? And are not all his sisters with us? Where then did this man get all this?" And they took offense at him. But Jesus said to them, "Prophets are not without honor, except in their own country and in their own house. And he did not do many deeds of power there because of their unbelief."
I see.
So that's another account of this, him going home. And the Mark and the Matthew are pretty similar with this. He goes home and all of these people are like, "I can see your sister right there. Like, I know who you are."
Right.
And they don't really believe.
Right.
And so he kind of goes, "Well, I can't do anything here because I'm not able to because you don't believe.
Right.
But that's not the exact thing that Luke is saying.
Right.
Luke is saying that there is some level of belief, but something keeps Jesus from doing these acts of power.
Mm-hmm.
And he uses these examples from the Hebrew Bible, and he also is kind of just flaunting their expectations in a way that's very curious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's really interesting. You know, it puts me in mind of, you know, as like a young person, especially like, I feel like that sort of college age where you feel like, oh, I'm an adult now. And then you go back home on like spring break or over the summer and you feel like you're 12 again because everyone around you is sort of putting you back in that place. And you're like, no. I feel like an entirely different person now. That's only speaking for myself. But I felt like, you know, like college, for at least for me, was very transformative. It was the first time I moved away. It was the first time I literally hadn't lived in the same house I grew up in. And so there was that sort of like, I feel like everyone, you know, you come back and everyone sort of looked at me with the lens of like,
I think I know who you are.
Yeah, you're still exactly A, this person, and B, is almost like, it sort of put me in like the 12, 13, 14 range.
Yeah.
Just because like that was like, I had been, especially the church I grew up in, I had been there for 10, 15 years. And so it was very much like, okay, well, this is you. Leslie's back in her box. And like, I think it's a natural human thing for us that we all do. And but somehow very, very comforting to me that happened to Jesus also.
And it's this very strange treatment of, similarly, let's talk like that transition of when you want to be treated like an adult, let's say.
Yeah.
And then people will simultaneously treat you like a child, but then expect you to do things for them because now you're an adult.
Right.
I don't
now
know
you
if
have
this
that
is
value.
a universal experience, but the idea of like, oh, well, you can't have any feedback on XYZ that's happening, but oh, can you like still go run and drive and pick up the groceries and come back?
Sure.
And I was like, a lot of these weird transitions, or even I have not been retired, but I can imagine where as you're, I don't know, shifting between jobs or something, you're kind of like, well, I don't have this job anymore. But like, there's these like weird transitions where you're expected to still do what someone else thinks is convenient, so they don't have to. I may not making any sense.
No, I think that's really interesting. I think you've named. I think it's good to also think about that. There's a number of these transitions in life. There's a number of these seasons in life where the transitions don't always happen smoothly.
Yeah.
Right. You don't sort of like flip a switch and everybody's like, oh, this is you now. And I think it's always good to think about, you know, how we're approaching other people, and from that sense of like, are we. What sort of, how are we viewing them, and how is that affecting how we're treating them? Are we meeting them where they are? Or are we meeting them where we think they are, where we remember
And is
them being?
there an expectation that we're expecting them to do something for us?
Sure.
And-
Right. Which is kind of the heart of this story,
Yeah.
right? That they're like, oh yeah, well, that's the carpenter's son, but maybe he can help us.
And they're like amazed until he says, like, you probably want me to do something for you, right?
Yeah.
I'm not gonna. And they're all like,
Hey, let's throw you off a cliff.
Yeah, which kind of extreme,
A bit much.
but
Yeah. I know.
there's a lot of like extreme reactions in the Bible.
Yeah, that seems. I'm noticing that. I feel like you tend to
Yeah.
get these stories a lot.
I mean,
or they just happen everywhere.
I mean, there's also like this, oh, like, guess we have to stone them to death. And Jesus is like, hey, do we?
Do we though? But maybe not. I appreciate that about Jesus. I have to say, I appreciate that.
One of the many things.
One of the many, pick one of the many things. Exactly. I love that he just, so that they might hurl him off the cliff, but he passed through the midst of them and went on his way, which is the most, I expected to be like, no, thank you.
And when I was flipping through earlier is my, Oxford annotated fancy little Bible.
Yeah.
That is huge.
It is.
And when I was looking at this scripture at the end, it was like, maybe that's a reference to the resurrection. And I was like, I don't know how, but maybe
this through the midst of them went on his way.
They were trying to kill him. But he passed through the midst of them and went on his way. And I was maybe, but I thought that was an interesting one where I was like, I don't really see it, but if I like looked a little harder,
I guess,
or if I knew the Greek or something.
I do wonder. Ed will often in this podcast be like, well, the Greek root of this or the Hebrew root of this, which is
some of those
extremely handy.
Some of those, I have classmates through divinity school who learned languages, Hebrew, Greek, and they're like, whoa, this is weird. Of these like kind of hidden depths and intricacies that never came up until they had that little behind the scenes. And then they were like, they've been translating this as this the whole time.
Yeah. I find that is actually been learning about that through Ed has been so helpful for me to approach the Bible for myself. Because a lot of the times I'm reading it and going, what? Sorry, what? And I think for me, knowing that sometimes the translations are maybe not, maybe a little weird, or because when you get translations of it, it's just a bad game of telephone, right? By the end, because it's like a translation of a translation of a translation sometimes. And so I find for me,
it's like an interpretation of a translation or something. But like all translators are interpreters.
Right.
You can never get out of making a choice between words. There's no true objectivity when it comes to it. And then you're translating, you're making a choice for a translation for a story that someone's telling sometimes decades after the life of Jesus. Yeah. So for me, when I think it's worth saying out loud that people who have made a choice to take the Bible literally, I think it's, I always question that because it's like, but what are you taking? Which Bible? Which literally? And why? And especially, because I have seen in culture, some people kind of really latch onto one translation. And that's always fascinating because then the kind of translation of the Bible gains more power than the original text in Greek or Hebrew, or even there are other languages in the original languages. And so you have this question of like, who gets to, and this is a little off topic. I'm just going to keep going. Yeah. So when I was in divinity school, I took a class, Foundations of Islam. And when you are reading the Quran, the only true way to read the Quran is in the original Arabic. Okay. And so you have to learn that language in order to read and in order to really interpret. Okay. There are translations, but they are not the Quran. They're not accepted. Whereas in Christianity, the Bible has been translated into like every language that missionaries could get their little hands on. Right. And on the one hand, that's amazing, asterisk. Right. And you have certain languages that have been able to be kind of brought back from the brink because you have these like massive texts. But also, since it's translated into all of these languages, on the one hand, it's more accessible. More people can do the work of translating. More people can do the work of interpreting and being inspired. But on the other hand, what the original meaning is so much more confusing. Right. I was reading something recently that has stuck with me and I think pertains to this conversation, which is someone said that the Bible is not a set of directions. It is a direction in the sense of it is something that is pointing you towards more faithfulness, more a better way, or quote, better way of living, a more loving way of being, in the sense of like maybe each individual direction is not as important as the collective message of love, of caring for your neighbor, of loving God, of all that sort of the larger message is really the important part. And when we get into the sort of nitty gritty, we can really get in the weeds. And not to say it's not important to discuss this, and it's intellectually so stimulating, so fascinating. But this idea that like, maybe it's worth just looking at the bigger message. And it's also, again, now we're talking more about the Bible, which is something I can talk about for a very long time.
You're in the right place for this. We do this a lot. We tend to zoom out a lot.
Yeah, well, the Bible itself is used And I love doing this in confirmation class. I love doing this. Maybe I'll have a moment for all ages where I pull this out. Is the Bible is used for so many different things.
Okay.
So you have this Bible, which I will hold up for people who are watching, or you can kind of hear the sound of it wiggling.
It is hefty. It's about the size of my complete Shakespeare.
It's huge.
Yeah.
And this is a study Bible. And this is an Oxford annotated. Half the pages are like annotations, and that's something, this is a Bible used for study.
Okay.
I have other Bibles used for devotion. I have Bibles that, like, I have the Bible my mom got when she was 10, and she highlighted things in it. And so now I have it and I've underlined things, and there's like pictures and like postcards. And so like that is a very different use of the Bible than like, oh, what does the Greek say? Oh, I'm going to like do this research paper.
Yeah.
So you can write research papers on the Bible. You can use it as this kind of personal devotion of reading. You can use it kind of as a lot of people carry a Bible kind of as like a protection or like a comfort item. Sometimes people have scripture tattooed on their arms. And so all of these like uses of scripture are very different.
I love that.
And so as you kind of turn to Luke 14 through 30, chapter 4, on the one hand, you could be like, well, this says something very different from the other two gospel accounts. That could be intimidating of, is one of them more or less true? But it could also be really interesting is what is different in the way that this account happens, and why is that difference interesting? Because the difference is interesting because we're able to have this conversation of like, well, if it isn't just about they don't have enough faith, I can't do this miracle.
Right.
Why else might he not be doing as many miracles? And is there something to be said about the not everyone gets a miracle? Or is there something to be said about sometimes when you're working in one community, you can't really work in the community that you live in.
Right.
And like, what is the balance between like serving and being a member? It's there's like so many interesting conversations that can come out of this.
Yeah. And I know it makes me think that there's many organists who don't join the churches where they work.
Yeah.
They don't have the membership there because to them serving and then worshiping are often very separate experiences. How do you feel about sort of what's your feeling on like worshiping and then serving and like how those interact for you in a worship experience?
And that's, so I don't know how much I've said on the podcast. I didn't join the church until I was in college.
Okay.
I'd been to one or two church services with friends, but I'd never been a member of a church. And very shortly after I joined the church, I knew I was going to go to divinity school.
Wow.
So I had been a member of the church for probably less than 6 months by the first time I was preaching.
Wow.
And so to me, I'm actually more comfortable serving and being part of the team than I am worshiping.
Okay.
Because
you've actually had more time.
I had more time.
Yeah.
It's a little bit like unsettling to be receiving. And sometimes I think there's also like, as someone who was not raised Christian, I was like, am I doing something wrong? Like, am I supposed to be standing up or sitting down?
Sure.
Like, should I be thinking harder at this sermon? Which I'm sure is a thing that everyone experiences. But when you have that extra element of like doubt of, am I doing this right? And so it's a very different experience when you are, even if you're just doing a reading, because you kind of know the behind the scenes and you know what's happening. And so I talk to clergy who are like, when I want to worship, I have a Sunday off. If I'm going to church, I'm going to go to a church like 25 miles away.
Sure.
Where like, I also don't know the pastor and I'm not.
Yeah, I get completely out.
But another big question that sometimes comes up in clergy boundary awareness and clergy stuff is, does your family go to the same church that you serve at?
Yeah.
which is a very interesting question.
Yeah.
And I think kind of in line, especially with that kind of Matthew of like, I know your sister, I know your brother, I know your mom. Who are you? Like, what's happening?
Yeah. It is interesting because I feel like in any ministerial pastoral role, the family also becomes a lot of part of it.
Yeah.
You know, which for my spouse, I think it took some adjustment because my husband was raised in the Greek Orthodox Church. And so his experience of church was very, very different.
Yes.
And so actually when we were dating early on, he came to Christmas Eve and was like, he's like, wait a minute.
You get to see the whole service.
Like, wait, and it's all in English and it's all
They don't
like,
leave
you can
and go behind a
understand
door
it. It's not an ancient, it's not, no, reading ancient Greek that not even the Greeks understand. Like he was thrilled. But I think for him, that adjustment of like people like kind of want to see him, the expectation, it's almost easier, I think, now that we have a kid because he can kind of like be like, I have brought the child. And that gives
My duty has been
It gives him
done.
kind of the job and like he can hang out with her and he's like a little buddy now. And so that helps than him just coming by himself. But it's kind of a funny thing with the family. I actually want to go back if I can to your experience because if I can join you in that experience because to normalize it a little bit. So I was raised in the church purely because the preschool at the church where I grew up was the best preschool in town. And my parents highly prioritized education. So I was raised in that church because of the preschool. And then there was like a girls choir starting. And so my mom was like, you want to do that? I'd already been taking piano at the church. And my mom was like, you want to do that? I was like, yes. And so I just, from very, very young, my main experiences in worship were leading music. Like it's a solid, like, well, now that I've been at this for a really long time, but like now it's a solid like 99% of my worship experience has always been leading music. So in the same way that you're like, well, I was preaching and everything. It's like, it is very rare for me to sit in a worship service
and you almost
that I'm
know
not
what
doing
to do.
something. And I'm like, I have to like sit on my hands because I get kind of fidgety anyways as just a fidgety
and then, like,
human. And
your brain, especially once you've kind of done that to the extent, like then your brain starts going like, oh, interesting choice they just made when they had this is something I should remember that they had the
I'll
song
like
before
circle a hymn or an anthem. I'm like, that was cool. I should bring that back to my choir.
Or sometimes someone's preaching and I'm like, I wonder how they're going to tie this back around. And I'm like,
oh yeah,
it's hard to
get in a worship mindset when worship is work,
which has its own like weird challenges.
Yeah. I will admit I completely love it. Like that experience for me is so cool. And like sometimes like when the choir is singing or like even on Sunday we did this really rockin' version of This Little Light of Mine. And like that for me is worshipful. Like I find my own little tiny moments of just like my whole body's like, you know, and I feel very like it's very profound in just a different way, at least for me.
And it's a little more participatory, which is where a lot of people find, and that's when you have communities of worship that are more embodied or more kind of participatory. Yeah, like I understand why.
Yeah, for me, I think it works for my personality and my own like. It just works for me, I guess. I was always sort of meant to do it. Yeah, there was a period where I wasn't leading worship as much in my life, and I was like, I don't know what to do with myself.
And that's also there's a part of me where I'm like, I want to be like doing a reading, or I want to be
put me in coach. I love that. That's so interesting. We've taken a turn. So I think I mentioned this in the podcast before, that Lillian and I were talking before she came on the first podcast, like we are going to take tangents. And I think we have, but I think we brought it together. Yeah. I think we've tied it together.
And this is also behind the scenes. This is the first time that I'm doing a podcast on a scripture that I was not also writing a sermon on.
Yes.
So there's also less. There's
less notes.
I don't have like 10 to 15 minutes of content in my head.
That's okay.
It's kind of preloaded, but it's
I appreciate how much you shared with our
Yeah.
audience about your life. I'm sure they'll enjoy that.
Yeah.
It's interesting to know. It's so interesting how, especially here at Round Hill, so people find us from so many different life experiences.
Yeah.
And I love that. I think it's really interesting because like I've had been more communities that are a little bit more like straightforward. And this one is just like, I think because it's a air quote community church, because there isn't a denominational association, it's like there's this sense of as they say in the South, y'all come. In the sense of like you can come from anywhere and we will accept and love you and celebrate with you and hold your hand and sit with you, and like we literally do not care where you were before this.
And I think also not having a denomination, I don't know, I'm making things up. I think sometimes there can be pressure of, am I giving something up and do I have to commit to something new?
There's more of like a joining
Yeah.
thing. And I think here there's a little bit more of like everyone comes with their own unique viewpoint, their own unique theology. And there's obviously there's commonalities, but we're not going to like make you accept every single thing we, air quote, we believe in order to be fully welcome and fully part of it. We don't have that, like, you have to accept, you have to have the Apostles' Creed memorized.
Oh my
this
God.
version and this version. And I'm allowed to say that. I worked for the Episcopal Church for a while.
I love my Episcopal friends.
Me too. We were talking about Berkeley the other day. This was great. Thank you so much. I know you have another meeting to get to, so I will let you go. It's waiting.
This is an important podcast.
Oh, we're so glad. Thank you so much for being here, Lillian.
Of course, thank you for having me.
And thank you for listening. Round Hill Radio is brought to you by the friends and members of Round Hill Community Church. For more information, please visit roundhillradio.org.
If you enjoyed this podcast, there are a few things that you can do that would make a big difference to us. Like the video, subscribe if you aren't, and click the notification bell and select all. Thank you.